This video describes how to write the thesis outline for the essay assignment. In any history essay, there are certain building blocks that are necessary to fully answer a question. And history essays are written differently than essays in other disciplines. By the time you reach the college level, you'll be learning that when we write in different ways depending upon the discipline. So how you might write an essay for an English 1A class would be different than how you would write a history essay. So for a history essay, you will always need a thesis. A thesis is a 1 to 3 sentence answer to the question that provides the central argument for the paper, and it fully answers all portions of the question. For a history essay, you want your full argument laid out right up front. You don't want to keep any secrets and throw any surprises at your reader in the middle of the essay. You want the reader to know exactly what it is you are going to argue, and then you argue it. History essays also contain historical context, which is background historical information that helps the reader better understand your argument and your answer to the question. Historians must provide sources and evidence. It is not enough to just state ideas about the past. You must prove your answers. And historians demand quite a bit of evidence. So as you're writing your paper, think about a historian leaning in your ear and just saying, prove it, prove it, prove it. So make sure you include sufficient evidence and examples. There are two kinds of evidence, primary sources, which are documents created during the time period you are studying, and secondary sources, documents created by people who are studying the time period, but did not live through it themselves. So historians write secondary sources. Our sources that we are using are mostly secondary sources. The textbook, of course, is a secondary source, and then also the PBS video that you are watching for the paper is a secondary source. However, within the PBS video, we do have some primary sources. So the oral histories of the people who had ridden the rails, those are our primary sources. All right, that moves us on to the thesis statement. A thesis statement fully answers all parts of the question. So here's a sample question. Did the civil rights movement create economic, social, and political equality for African Americans? Here's one example of a thesis answer to that question. The civil rights movement failed to create perfect equality for African Americans. Now, that would receive the grade of a C, because it answers the question, but it doesn't elaborate on the answer. So it's not enough to just give this kind of general answer. You need to be more specific. In a history paper, again, the reader wants to know where you are going with this paper. So here's an A thesis statement. The civil rights movement failed to create perfect equality for African Americans. And then it goes on to elaborate on that. Although the movement made important gains in social and political equality by ending segregation and ensuring the African American right to vote, it failed to establish economic equality. So this thesis statement speaks to the three aspects of the question: economic, social, and political equality. The outline to your paper is going to show your instructor how you plan to lay out your paragraphs. So you're going to logically lay out your paragraphs, and for each paragraph you need to explain what the central idea is. Oops, there's a typo. You need to explain what the central idea is and the evidence to be used. And do not forget to include the evidence to be used. That is often something that students will omit from the outline. So I think students leave it out because it does take extra work. You need to come up with the idea and then come up with the examples or the quotes, the ideas that you're going, the evidence, the proof you're going to use for that idea. So your outline will begin with an introduction. That first paragraph will set the historical stage. You need to let your reader know what the general historical context of your paper is. So for this paper, it would be, of course, the Great Depression and unemployment and problems that families were having. And you can use your textbook to help set the historical stage. The introduction should also contain the thesis. Now, this is a very short paper, 3 to 4 pages. If you had a longer paper, your thesis might come in the second paragraph or third even. But this is a short paper. We need to establish the context and the argument right up front in that first paragraph. Each paragraph should contain one major idea that helps argue the thesis and should contain evidence from the reading and video that prove that major idea. So you don't want to have too many ideas in one paragraph. Just one idea is good. And your paragraph should be arranged in a logical, organized fashion that helps argue the thesis. So in a history paper, a common way to organize the paper is chronologically. So change over time. Another way is topically. So you organize the paper according to the topics. It's often a good idea to organize your paper in the same way that the question is organized. So answer the first part of the question first, the second part second, and the third part third. So here's an example of a very abbreviated outline. This is not what you should hand in. It just gives you a general idea of what you should have. So for the introduction, you should, in point form, explain what the historical context is. Outlines are always in point form. The only thing that in your outline that's going to be in a full sentence is your thesis statement. Okay, so you're going to include your thesis statement. And then you also want your reader to know what are the main topics in each of the paragraphs. So topic number 1, for each of the paragraphs you're going to tell your reader in point form what the main idea is to prove your thesis. And then you are also going to include the evidence. So you might have several bullet points listing the pieces of evidence and examples that you are going to use. And then you would continue this format for each of the subsequent paragraphs up until the conclusion. And in the conclusion, generally what we do is restate our thesis and also explain why it matters. All right, here's a more detailed look at what an outline. This is just the first 2 paragraphs. So for this civil rights paper, you'd have the historical background, then you'd write out your thesis statement. Here's the first paragraph in that essay. So the first paragraph in that sample essay begins with the idea the civil rights movement succeeded in ending segregation in the South. And that is going to be the main idea for that paper. And here is the evidence that the student is going to use. They're going to elaborate on this main idea, and then they're going to prove it with this evidence. So don't forget the evidence. All right, that's it. Good luck with your thesis outline, and I hope you enjoy the video that was assigned for this.